This video shows that you can use Tableau with the cloud-based aact database to investigate clinical trials as a whole and better understand this dataset through visualizations. In this demo, we'll use aact and Tableau to investigate those studies that are likely applicable to FDAA regulations and see if we can identify which of these studies are more or less likely to be late in having results reported. So let's get started. To access aact from Tableau, we'll need to provide login credentials. So we'll go to the aact website, which is aact.city-clinicaltrials.org, and we will click on Connect. At the bottom of the page in this black box are the credentials. The only one that's difficult to memorize is hostname. Everything else will be just aact. Now start up Tableau. And we'll pick Postgres SQL over here on the left because that's the type of platform that the aact database is on. We copy and paste our host name into this server, which I've already done before. The database name is aact with 2 A's, username aact with 2 A's, and the password is also aact. And we sign in, and it will at this point go out and connect to the aact database that's hosted in the cloud. So on the left are the 40 tables that are part of the aact database. The main one is studies. This contains, at this point, about 237,000 studies, all those that are in clinicaltrials.gov. All the other tables are related back to studies with the NCT ID. So we only want a subset of the studies here, so we're going to create a custom SQL. So we'll click on New Custom SQL, and I have already written a bit of SQL that will identify the FDAA, likely FDAA regulated studies. It finds those that are drugs and biologicals and those that are devices. This SQL might not be 100%, but it's pretty close. For this demo, it should serve our purposes. Flow has used our SQL to go out and retrieve the data based on that query, and this is the information that it retrieves. So this is the data that we'll be working with. One other table that I'm going to be using to connect to that, to link to that, is calculated values. Basically, calculated values has a set of information that helps us analyze the data. There's one row per study, and it includes, one of those data elements is called were results reported. So that's going to help us do our analysis. I think it's interesting that Tableau is smart enough to know that it needs to use the NCT ID to link these two data sets, these two tables. So now we have our data source set up, we can go and start looking at it. So we'll go to sheet 1, and the first thing I'm going to do is drag number of records or number of studies up to rows so we could see how many we're dealing with. 68,438. It'll also be interesting to grab that attribute that I just mentioned, were results reported, which is under calculated values. We can drag that to colors to see how many of these have results. It's just 11,768. The next thing we're going to do is show how these studies are distributed across the years with the primary completion date. So this will show how many studies were completed in each of the years. I'll drag this over to a column. Tableau assumes that we want a year, and then it gives us one column for each year and how many studies were completed then and how many of those have results. So we should notice that this is going out into the future. So clearly this is including not only just the actual completion dates, but there are anticipated completion dates. We're not really interested in those, so we're going to filter those out. This primary completion date type is the one that identifies whether it's actual or anticipated. We only want actual, so we'll click on that and say OK, and it removes all the other types. Another thing is that the FDAA allows people to have 1 year after the primary completion date to enter their results. So we're really only interested in those studies that were completed a year ago or more. So we will drag this to the filters and add a maximum filter on that and restrict it to just those that have a primary completion date of a year ago or more. So now this gives a good idea of how many studies were completed in each of these years and how many of them have results. It drops off there, it seems to drop off some here at the end, and I suspect that's because they just haven't been completed long enough to give people a chance to enter those results. All to say that those studies that were completed in 2012, they've had 5 years to enter those results, so they're more likely to have them. That's my theory.